What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. Woody Johnson might not be selling the team, but we may have gotten the next best thing, which is an extended absence. And like the rest of you, I would be thrilled if this ends up being the case. So, the expectation right now, with Donald Trump winning the election once again, is a repeat of history. Last time Trump won, Woody Johnson being a big donator, big supporter, he was appointed to London, where he stayed for 3.5 years. This led to his brother, Christopher Johnson, taking over in the interim and making a lot of the day to day business decisions while keeping Woody in the loop. But it felt like a transition of ownership to a certain degree, right? We expect the same thing this go around, where once again, as a big supporter, big donator, Woody Johnson would be appointed once more. Now, whether that's London or somewhere new doesn't necessarily matter, but more so the fact that he won't be around the New York Jets facility on a day in and day out basis, impacting football operations, coaching, free agency moves, off season strategic plans, et cetera. Here, now I bring this up not just to be thrilled or introduce the news to you guys that we may see an absence from Woody Johnson, but really to kind of discuss the current events and what's been going on and why this may be important. And the timeline is one of the biggest pieces of this, right? So last time he was appointed, it was towards, I think, the at some point in June or July. And he made his preparations, started leaving, boom, he's gone for 3.5 years. If that same timeline is true, that means that he will still be around for the potential contract extension of Joe Douglas or the firing of our GM, being a part of the head coach search, which, per the Rooney rule, regardless of if Jeff Ulbrich gets a standing ovation for going undefeated the rest of the season and going into the playoffs and winning the Super Bowl in the wildest of expectations or events, we still need to conduct a head coaching search. So he would be there for that. And you don't want Woody Johnson having to make those two critical decisions just based on history, right? You don't even have to say recent history. We know the hirings haven't been great. And I would say that is true because there's not a ton of his coaching staff throughout the league that have gone on to have success. There's definitely been guys that have been successful elsewhere, but more often than not, I think you see these guys end up kind of flaming out, going to college ranks, or just taking time off and either not returning or returning to not successful stints. So, recency bias, or at least some of the names off the top of my head that come to mind. Marty Mordenweg, I think, came back and had some level of success. LaFleur, obviously having some level of success, but not a ton of names that come to mind that wow you, right? Todd Bowles kind of having a bit of a resurgence. But I say that to say, if the timeline gets moved up, that's perfect. Woody Johnson isn't here for those. I have other questions around how we conduct our search for a potential GM and head coach. But more important than that, we had the chance during halftime or prior to halftime of the Texans game for sell the team, right? I think that's where a lot of us are at as fans, in that Woody Johnson has been so inept in operating a successful franchise or even just an average one, right? That we can't bear it anymore, right? There's only so much that a person can endure. And if it wasn't for the circus theatrics, if it wasn't for chasing the headlines, if it wasn't for the laughable moments of upping, PSL season ticket holder prices and all of these different things, and then we end up having to suffer through a 6 game losing streak, you would, you'd be fine. He'd be just like any other owner that's kind of going through the ebbs and flows. That isn't the New England Patriots, that isn't the Chiefs, when you want to talk about some of these dynasties that you see over decades. One of the more recent reports that I've seen come out was from Albert Breer, and I believe he's a Sports Illustrated guy. But I also seen Brian Costello speak to this. I've seen Mike Florio, who I don't care to mention as much, but still, just some key guys that have spoken to the current environment, the current situation that Woody Johnson has created, and that is that many people within the organization feel like they're walking on eggshells. In fact, one of the things from that article was that prior to Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas joining the New York Jets, many people were warning them about the volatility of Woody Johnson. And I don't want to say this from a point of aggression, right? Woody Johnson isn't, beating people upside of the head or doing anything crazy, but a lot of the, especially in this year, a lot of what's called out is how emotionally unintelligent, I would say, EQ isn't there, and predictable he can be in the face of pressure, in the face of failure, in the face of a lack of either having a great strategic plan or the absence of a strategic plan in general. And I would say that all of the moves that you've seen since catering to acquiring Aaron Rodgers is a huge sign of that. Now, the walking on eggshells piece comes from the fact that if you recall, there was a portion where Robert Sala got betrayed by Joe Beningo, released or shown or went through something about some text messages between themselves that didn't need to be shared. Ended up being a whole fiasco. There was a few articles that came out right after that, and a lot of it was pretty damning, of course, if it turned out to be true. But ultimately, it painted Robert Sala as a highly emotional guy that was pretty much swayed by anything perception wise that could be put in a bad light for the New York Jets, for him, for his players, et cetera, and really not handling and reacting to those in an appropriate manner. I would say if that is true for Robert Sala, that is true to the nth degree for Woody Johnson. I mean, any piece of news that comes anything close to going viral, anything that's talked about in more than just one press conference or brought up by more than one player, or even if it comes from just a player we consider to be a star in and of itself, Woody Johnson takes it upon himself to run with that, and we can see that in a lot of the moves that he's made. And basically, it all boils down to the fact that the guy that ultimately is technically running the show, right? We've seen Woody Johnson insert himself into many difficult situations that guys like Joe Douglas and Robert Sala may not have wanted to pull off, and he's forced the issue, forced their hand, taking over responsibilities that they have just for the namesake of the headlines, right? So I can see that putting anybody in an unenviable situation, and is one of the major talking points for us this offseason when it comes to potentially looking for a new general manager, when it comes to not potentially, but looking for a new head coach is who can we attract when walking through the door. The first expectation from the new people is that this owner has no idea what he's doing, and it's not that he's just going to take a back seat. He's backseat driving. And so you really can't do the job that you want to do because you have to make Woody Johnson feel good about it and make sure that it makes sense to him from, a dollars and headline standpoint, which is not how successful franchises are run. So I, for one, am extremely thrilled to hear that he may be absent. Again, he may not be absent when it matters, but if you can at least nail one of the jobs, GM or head coach, just thinking from like the half glass empty kind of approach, right? Worst case scenario, maybe we get the next GM, right? Maybe the head coach isn't necessarily the guy, but he can do a good enough job of coaching up all of this talent we've acquired. You can still come out well knowing that maybe the head coach can get better. Maybe he can find a way to sync with the GM a little bit more. The GM finds a way to really build that chemistry with the head coach as time progresses. And Christopher, being a guy that was a little bit more hands off, can help see things play out the way you would expect it to, based on the head coach and general manager's ability. So I'm very intrigued on how this plays out. Let me know what you guys ultimately think, though. High level wise thoughts on Woody Johnson, and what do you think it's out? It probably goes without being said, but is it a positive to you that Woody Johnson would potentially be gone during this important time of hiring a new regime, which is what it really feels like. And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.